My girlfriend vanished. Her note said, "Don't look for me." I replied, "No problem." Then I found out she stole my late mother's jeweled collection worth $400,000. The police found her, and her only calls were to beg me to drop charges. I, 29M, thought I knew the woman I was planning to marry. I was wrong. The morning I found the note, I was making coffee like any other Tuesday. Sarah had been acting strange for weeks, distant, secretive, always checking her phone. I chalked it up to work stress. She'd been complaining about her demanding boss and long hours at the marketing firm. The handwritten note sat on my kitchen counter, propped against the coffee maker where she knew I'd see it first thing. "Don't look for me. I need to disappear for a while. This isn't about you. Please respect my decision." That was it. No explanation, no goodbye kiss. Just 11 words that ended our 2-year relationship. Her clothes were gone from our shared closet, her toiletries missing from the bathroom. Even her favorite coffee mug had vanished. I stared at the note for maybe 10 minutes, letting the reality sink in. Then I crumpled it up, tossed it in the trash, and went to work. If she wanted to disappear, that was her choice. I wasn't going to beg. My coworkers noticed my mood that day. When they asked where Sarah was, I told them we'd broken up. Simple, clean, no drama. The first week passed in a blur of takeout dinners and Netflix binges. I threw myself into my software development projects, working late to avoid coming home to an empty apartment. Friends reached out, offering condolences and invitations to grab drinks. I declined most of them. It was my neighbor Mrs. Chun who first mentioned seeing men at my apartment. She stopped me in the hallway on Friday evening, her weathered face creased with concern. She told me she'd seen 2 men in suits leaving my building that afternoon. They'd asked her about me and Sarah, showing badges. Police badges. My stomach dropped. I asked her what they'd wanted to know, but she could only tell me they'd seemed professional and serious. "They'd left business cards under my door," she said. I rushed upstairs and found the cards scattered on my doormat. Detective Morrison and Detective Hayes from the Metropolitan Police Department. The note on the back was brief. They needed to speak with me about Sarah Williams regarding an ongoing investigation. I called the number immediately. Detective Morrison answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly and tired. He asked if I could come to the station that evening or if they should visit me at home. The seriousness in his tone made me choose the station. The police headquarters smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. Detective Morrison was a tall man with graying temples, while Detective Hayes was younger with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. They led me to a small interview room with white walls and a metal table. Morrison asked me when I'd last seen Sarah. I told them about the note, about her disappearance 6 days ago. Hayes took notes while Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying me. Then Morrison asked me about my mother's jewelry collection. The question hit me like a physical blow. I hadn't thought about my mother's jewelry in months. After she died 3 years ago from cancer, I'd stored her collection in my bedroom safe. The same safe Sarah knew the combination to because I'd asked her to grab important documents from it before. I excused myself and called my landlord, asking him to meet me at the apartment immediately. The detectives followed me home, their presence making everything feel surreal and threatening. The safe sat in my bedroom closet, behind a false panel my father had installed years ago. My hands shook as I entered the combination. The steel door swung open to reveal empty velvet-lined compartments where my mother's treasures should have been. Gone. All of it. The diamond necklace my father had given her for their 10th anniversary. The emerald earrings she'd inherited from her grandmother. The vintage Cartier watch. The pearl bracelet she'd worn to my college graduation. I sank onto my bed, the full weight of Sarah's betrayal crashing over me. She hadn't just left me. She'd stolen the last physical connection I had to my mother. Detective Morrison crouched beside me, his expression sympathetic but professional. He asked me to estimate the value of the missing pieces. I told them what I remembered from the insurance appraisal I'd done after my mother's death, approximately $400,000. Hayes whistled low under his breath. Morrison asked if I had documentation, photos, insurance records. I nodded numbly and retrieved the appraisal folder from my filing cabinet. The detectives explained that Sarah had been flagged trying to sell a piece at a high-end jewelry store in Chicago. The shop owner had become suspicious when she couldn't provide proper documentation and had contacted authorities. Security footage showed her clearly, and when they ran her identification, they'd found she was wanted in connection with similar thefts in 2 other states. The news that Sarah was apparently a professional thief, that our entire relationship had likely been a setup, left me feeling hollow and stupid. I thought about all the times she'd asked casual questions about my family, my mother's things, my financial situation. How she'd volunteered to organize my important papers and had insisted on knowing where I kept everything valuable. Morrison told me they'd tracked her to a motel in Phoenix where she'd been arrested that morning. She was being held on charges of grand larceny and interstate transportation of stolen goods. They'd recovered some of the jewelry, but several pieces had already been sold. The detective asked if I wanted to press charges. The question seemed absurd. Of course I wanted to press charges. This woman had systematically planned to rob me of the most precious things I owned. Update 1. The call started 3 days later. I was at work when my phone first rang with a number I didn't recognize. I ignored it. Then it rang again. And again. By the 5th call, I answered. Sarah's voice was different, smaller, desperate. She was calling from the county jail in Phoenix, and she was crying. She begged me to talk to her, to listen to her explanation. I hung up. She called back immediately. This time I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to her message, hating myself for being curious. She claimed she'd never meant for things to go this far. She said she'd gotten involved with the wrong people, that she owed money to dangerous individuals who had threatened her. She insisted that taking the jewelry had been her only way out of a bad situation, and that she'd planned to return everything once she'd settled her debts. I deleted the message and blocked the number. But Sarah was resourceful. She called from different numbers, other inmates' accounts, her lawyer's office, even a number that appeared to be from a hospital. Each time, the story got more elaborate. She told me about an abusive ex-boyfriend who'd forced her into theft. She claimed she was pregnant with my child. She said she had cancer and needed money for treatment. I stopped answering calls from unknown numbers entirely. Detective Morrison contacted me with updates. They'd recovered about 60% of the jewelry, though some pieces had been significantly damaged or had gems removed. The insurance company was involved now, processing claims for the unrecovered items. The detective also informed me that Sarah's real name wasn't Sarah Williams. It was Jessica Chun, and she had a criminal record spanning 5 states. The woman I'd lived with for 2 years, the woman I'd been planning to propose to, was a complete fabrication. The revelation sent me into a spiral of second-guessing every moment we'd shared. Had any of it been real? The way she'd laughed at my jokes, the quiet Sunday mornings we'd spent reading together, the night she'd cried in my arms after watching a sad movie. Had it all been an act? My therapist, Dr. Peterson, helped me process the anger and betrayal. She explained that people like Jessica, Sarah, were skilled manipulators who could maintain false personas for extended periods. The relationship had felt real to me because parts of it probably were real, even if her ultimate motivation was criminal. Update 2. The trial was scheduled for 3 months later. Jessica's lawyer contacted me multiple times, trying to negotiate a plea deal that would reduce her charges in exchange for my testimony about her character and our relationship. I refused every offer. During the pretrial phase, I learned more about Jessica's criminal history. She'd been running similar scams for over a decade, targeting men in long-term relationships and slowly gaining access to their valuable possessions. I was her 7th known victim, though investigators suspected there were others who hadn't come forward. The prosecutor, Ms. Rodriguez, was a sharp woman in her 40s who specialized in fraud cases. She explained that Jessica's pattern was always the same. She'd establish a relationship, move in gradually, gain trust and access, then disappear with whatever she could carry. The amounts varied, but mine was the largest theft they could prove. 2 weeks before the trial, Jessica's calls became more frantic. She'd somehow gotten my work number and called during a team meeting. My boss had to ask me to step out when I started shouting into the phone. Jessica was sobbing, begging me to understand that she'd never wanted to hurt me. She claimed she'd fallen in love with me for real, that stealing from me had been the hardest thing she'd ever done. She promised she'd pay back every penny if I would just drop the charges and give her a chance to make things right. I told her exactly what I thought of her promises and her love, then hung up and immediately contacted the prosecutor to report the harassment. Ms. Rodriguez arranged for a restraining order that would prevent Jessica from contacting me directly or through third parties. The violation of this order would add additional charges to her case. But the damage was done. Jessica's words had wormed their way into my head, making me question my decision to pursue the case. Late at night, I'd remember the good times we'd had together and wonder if there was some truth to her claims about being forced into crime. Dr. Peterson helped me recognize these thoughts as part of the manipulation. She reminded me that Jessica had had countless opportunities to tell me the truth, to ask for help, to find legal solutions to whatever problems she claimed to face. Instead, she'd chosen to systematically deceive and rob me. The first day of trial, I saw Jessica for the first time since she'd disappeared. She'd lost weight and looked smaller in her orange jumpsuit, flanked by her court-appointed attorney. When our eyes met across the courtroom, she mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," with tears streaming down her face. I looked away and focused on Ms. Rodriguez's opening statement. Update 3. The prosecution's case was thorough and damning. They presented evidence of Jessica's decade-long criminal career, testimony from previous victims, and security footage from the jewelry stores where she'd attempted to sell my mother's pieces. I testified about our relationship, about discovering the theft, about the emotional impact of losing these irreplaceable family heirlooms. The defense attorney tried to portray Jessica as a victim of circumstances, but the evidence was overwhelming. During her testimony, Jessica claimed that everything she'd told me in her phone calls was true, that she'd been forced into crime by an abusive ex-boyfriend who'd threatened to kill her if she didn't pay off gambling debts. She said she'd planned to return the jewelry after selling just a few pieces to satisfy her debt, but had panicked when the jewelry store called police. The prosecutor destroyed her story during cross-examination. There was no evidence of this mysterious ex-boyfriend, no documentation of threats, no proof of gambling debts. Phone records showed she'd been in contact with known fences and other criminals, not victims of domestic abuse seeking help. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Jessica broke down sobbing when the verdict was read. She turned to look at me one last time, mouthing please, as the bailiff led her away. I felt nothing but relief. During the sentencing phase, both sides presented statements about Jessica's character and the impact of her crimes. I chose not to make a victim impact statement. I'd said everything I needed to say during the trial. The judge sentenced Jessica to 8 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 5. She would also be required to pay full restitution for the unrecovered jewelry, though the prosecutor warned me that collecting from someone with no legitimate assets would be difficult. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't realized was there. The woman who devastated my life was finally being held accountable for her actions. Final update. 6 months after the trial, I received a letter from Jessica in prison. She'd apparently found a way to contact me despite the restraining order, though her lawyer claimed it was sent before the order took effect. The letter was 12 pages long, handwritten in the careful script I remembered from grocery lists and birthday cards. She wrote about her childhood, about making bad choices, about how meeting me had been the first time she'd ever felt genuine love. She claimed that living with me had shown her what a normal life could be like, and that she'd been planning to confess everything and return the jewelry when her past caught up with her. I read the entire letter once, then burned it. The insurance settlement came through a month later. Combined with the recovered jewelry, I received about 80% of the collection's appraised value. It wasn't the same as having my mother's actual pieces, but it was something. I used part of the money to take a trip to Europe, something my mother had always wanted to do but never had the chance. I visited the museums she'd dreamed of seeing, ate at restaurants she'd researched, stayed in the small Italian village where her grandparents had been born. On the last day of the trip, sitting in a cafe in Rome, I felt my phone buzz with a notification. Someone had tried to call from a blocked number. No voicemail. I deleted the missed call notification without a second thought and ordered another espresso. The healing process took time, but I eventually started dating again. I was more cautious now, more aware of red flags and manipulation tactics. Dr. Peterson helped me understand that Jessica's betrayal was about her character flaws, not my judgment or worth as a person. When people ask me about the relationship now, I tell them it taught me valuable lessons about trust and self-respect. I don't mention Jessica by name or dwell on the details. She's become what she always was, a footnote in my life, not a chapter. The last I heard, she was appealing her conviction while serving her sentence. Her lawyer sent one final request for me to provide character testimony that might help reduce her sentence. I didn't respond. Some people deserve second chances. Some don't. Jessica had shown me exactly who she was through her actions, and I finally learned to believe her. My mother's jewelry collection is gone forever, but the memories of her remain untouched. That's something Jessica could never steal, no matter how long we were together or how convincing her act was. Sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and building a better life without the person who tried to destroy you. Jessica is exactly where she belongs, and I'm exactly where I need to be.